Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by and for all the conversation that comes back from this podcast, actually. And there's plenty of it. It comes from different angles. I really appreciate it. Thank you. This morning I took a photograph of the sunrise at Dr. Christian Turner's Bothiga residence. He had a breakfast party for the general election. And I thank him for that invitation to view the outcome of the election, which David Cameron has now won all ends up, well as close to. Really a remarkable achievement. He tweeted, "Here's to a brighter future for everyone." And indeed, he must be extremely pleased with himself. And well done, David. Macro thoughts. There has been a massive repositioning over the last 10 days, and it is still ongoing. Said Philippe Goudin de Valérine, head of Euro research at Barclays in Paris. Some salespeople say there has been massive selling from Asia, but from a fundamental point of view, the move has certainly been excessive. It is difficult to understand, and I have to admit the same thing. Ferro TV tweeted yesterday that move in Bund earlier today of 19 basis points was the biggest move since August 2012. I'll put up the image that was tweeted with that tweet. Home thoughts. I'm reading some Amit Chaudhuri, and the book I'm reading is called The Immortals, but I like this quote of his. There's a thin line separating the delicate from the bloodless in art as in food. And I like this from the New Yorker. Lecky, who was in his mid-30s, was nostalgic for the carefree tribalism of his youth, which was spent with friends at soccer matches and dance clubs. The result, a spellbinding 15-minute video collage titled Fiorucci Made Me Hardcore, consists of found footage loosely documenting the history of British dance culture from the discos and all-night northern soul parties of the 70s to the illegal warehouse raves and decadent nightclubs of the 80s and the 90s. The fact that the dancing and the audio are rarely synchronized only heightens the sense of invisible euphoria as young people strut and whirl, sometimes in silence, always immune from judgment. Caught my attention. Political reflections, election results live, Conservatives set for shock victory as questions raised over future of Labour and Lib Dem leaders. Middle Eastern Eye tweeted an Israeli soldier talking of Gaza. It also becomes a bit like a computer game, totally cool and unreal. And then Intelligent Life magazine, politics is a massive lies, evasions, folly, hatred and schizophrenia. That was George Orwell. Oklahoma has been suffering from tornadoes touching down. I'll put up an image that I found. Saudi Arabia beheads 5 foreigners, hangs their corpses from the helicopter. In 2014, as many as 87 beheadings were carried out in the kingdom, but this year 79 people have already been beheaded. Currency markets, the euro was below 112, is back above it at 112.32. Dollar index, when I looked last, was at 94.70. Japanese yen 120.05 area. Swissy 0.9221. Pound has had a huge surge, but has come off the boil. It's now at 154.65. It was above 155. Aussie 0.7896 when I looked last. India rupee 63.955. South Korean won 1088.98. Rial 302.52. Egyptian pound 762.96. South African rand 1203.92. Sterling, I'll put up a 5-day chart. It's been all over the shop, but clearly this was an outcome that few pollsters predicted, and it's bullish for sterling. Gained 1.6% so far today, touched 155.23, its highest since February the 26th. Pulling further away from a 5-year low of 145.67, where it touched in mid-April. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. Obviously the big event today is the non-farm payrolls number. Dollar bulls took some hope from data on Thursday showing the number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits held near a 15-year low last week. The consensus forecast for non-farm payrolls is 224,000 in April, after gaining 126,000 in March when bad weather held back hiring. I'm not sure they're going to get such a strong number. Euro dollar put up a 3-month chart. This has been all over the shop and is part of those mysterious moves that we've seen of late. But two interesting points. Jamie at Reuters tweeted German 10-year bond yield and German 10-year bond volatility. Have a look at this, massive spike. And also look at this correlation he's drawing between the euro and 10-year German bond yield. He's saying it's closely correlated, and indeed it is, as you can see from this image. Gold, 1186 trading. I'll put up a 6-month chart. Crude oil, which has rallied extraordinarily, but has now come off there. It's last trading at $59.15. I think it's going to crumble below $50 at some point. Dubai's Emirates airline net profit has soared, according to the Wall Street Journal, and they really run a smashing operation. It really is impressive. Frontier reformers promise rich returns for patient investors. This is a blog on Wall Street Journal talking about Nigeria's currency set to remain under pressure for some time. Says London-based frontier market fund manager George Birch Reynardson, putting considerable pressure on consumer products companies in the country. Financial sector companies in Nigeria at valuations that are low enough to warrant continued investment. We added some financials around the time of the election, but we're still struggling to find attractive multiples on the consumer side. This Somerset believes the Naira's depreciation still has a way to run. I think it does, and I think, the incoming president should just devalue much more than is reasonable in order to let the market come back and find its equilibrium pricing. Moving to sub-Saharan Africa, Burundi, this was tweeted by AFP. A man begs for help from the military to escape a lynching by a mob in Bujumbura. Very visually arresting photograph, I'm sure you'll agree. And then, I don't know whether it was the same man or another man, was burned alive in Burundi, protest against presidential bid. They put tires around his neck and then burnt him, a witness told Reuters, after seeing the man killed in the Nyababiga district of Bujumbura, one of the protest flashpoints. Local media also reported the incident, while the Red Cross said a man was killed in Nyakabiga, but in line with its usual practice, did say how he died. It said a woman was killed in another area, taking Thursday's death toll to 2. And I wrote about this over the weekend. Eyes on Burundi, spillover risks from debacle loom. It seems to be getting worse. Guinea's government opposition in all-out war. For the moment, we're in the street. We are getting our activists out into the street, and we'll keep doing so as many times as is necessary, says the former Prime Minister Sidia Touré. Peter Pham said the universal support that Condé had 4 years ago, I think, is no longer there. After Burkina Faso, after Nigeria, Washington and its European partners are increasingly taking a much more robust look at African democracy. As a result, Pham believes the Guinea election process will be more closely scrutinized than it would have been a year or year and a half ago. I think what really happens in the next 6 months depends on both sides, on who is reading the international political winds correctly. And that took me to Virilio. The revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form, not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine, and itself becomes a motor, a machine of attack, in other words, a producer of speed. And I was then in that article talking about the world we live in today, seeing that we can see the battle for the street, from the streets of Bujumbura to the streets of Baltimore. November last year, I wrote about Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa and concluded that we need to ask ourselves how many people can an incumbent shoot stone cold dead in such a situation. 100. Burundi is not yet at 100. 1,000 or 10,000. And I said that is the point. There is a threshold beyond which the incumbent cannot go. Where that threshold lies will be discovered in the throes of the event. Riots signal what is going wrong with South Africa's economy is the headline in Bloomberg. Worst anti-immigrant violence in South Africa in 7 years has highlighted the woes of an economy hit by power shortages and unable to create enough jobs to bring down poverty. 2 weeks of mayhem last month in townships around Johannesburg and Durban left 7 people dead and thousands of mainly African immigrants fleeing their homes. TV screens and newspapers were splashed with images of mobs armed with knives and sticks targeting foreigners and looting their shops. Many of them are seen as competitors for jobs in a nation with a 24% unemployment rate. Tension underscores deteriorating prospects for an economy that suffered 40 days of rolling power blackouts this year, worsening labour relations characterised by violent strikes. It also highlights the ruling party's failure to do enough to improve the lives of millions of black South Africans, many of them still poor and jobless. South Africa's growing reputation for social volatility is deeply troubling. It's always been there. The business environment is already reeling from the country's third-rate electricity system, a lot better rate than the rest of Africa, volatile labour pool and rancorous political environment. And saying that the most immediate risk facing South Africa's economy this year is an electricity crisis that's cut production at companies such as Sibanye Gold, Hulamine Limited, Aluminium. Eskom Holdings is implementing almost daily rolling blackouts as it struggles to meet demand. South African oil shares come off the top. It's up 8.45% year to date. Dollar around 12.0626 last time I checked. Egyptian pound around the 762.75 level. The Egyptian stock market is down 0.94% year to date. Nigerian oil share up 2.24% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange up 1.03% year to date. The cedi, however, has plunged to 17% this year, the most among 24 African currencies tracked by Bloomberg. The deal maker who helped a US hedge fund score Congo oil prize is an interesting article for a businessman who doesn't spend much time at his Burgundy mansion in Morocco's ancient city of Marrakesh. Jean-Yves Olivier throws quite a dinner party. 3 servants in black tuxedos silently file past in the soft light, keeping the 9 French art dealers, lawyers, and charity workers topped up with a fruity blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. The guests dine on roast rosemary lamb, Mediterranean vegetables, and potato dauphinoise on crimson plates from Istanbul. Silver bowls brimmed with red roses, and 2 elephant tusks form an arch by a dining room wall. The chatter ranges from quips on French politics to exclamations at the crunchiness of the pomegranate seeds and the mousse. Olivier is dressed for comfort on this wet December night, wearing a woolen grey and white striped djellaba and Moroccan robe. He fills it out. Leaning back in an upholstered wooden chair, he throws out his arms and chortles at the compliments he's receiving about his recently published memoirs. The book tells how he rose from a teenage refugee fleeing Algeria to become one of Africa's canniest middlemen. Well worth a read. Zimbabwe is Southern Africa's worst country for investment. This is the ranking that the SADC has given, ranking of 170. Letter from Central Africa, May the 11th, issue Elephant Watch from the New Yorker. In November 2011, a caravan of poachers, as many as 100 by some counts, crossed into the Central African Republic on horseback from Sudan. They rode 700 miles along the northern border and entered Buja-Niger National Park in Cameroon. The caravan included a pack train of camels loaded with AK-47s, bags of ammunition, heavy machine guns, and 2 mortars. The poachers had been in the park before in 2010 when they killed about a dozen elephants and 2 park guards. This time they were shooting elephants in far greater numbers, and in some cases sawing off the tusks while the animals were still alive. Céline Cisler-Bienvenue, a regional director for the US-based International Fund for Animal Welfare, heard about the slaughter, travelled to the park and notified the authorities in Yaoundé. Cameroon's government sent a contingent of army troops to drive the poachers out. A handful of people on each side were killed or wounded in skirmishes. But the poachers, who were by then better acquainted with the park's geography, continued about their business. They were very well organised. When you looked at them, they stared straight back at you. They didn't fear anything from anybody. In the 3 months that the poachers were in the park, they killed 650 elephants. It's in the New Yorker, well worth a read. Very unfortunate. I'll put up a photograph that was taken by Luca Zanetti at Tocalos Bay, a protected clearing, Zangadoki National Park. Forest elephants gather in numbers unequaled elsewhere. On that note, I'll put up a photograph of the elephants crossing the Iwase Nyiro River that I took quite a while ago. I've watched a documentary about the elephants of Kilimanjaro, and it really was very, very powerful, and the link is on Rich Wrap-Ups if you go to watch it. And I'll also put up a photograph of elephants taken on the 1st of September 2013 in the Amboseli. We want to appeal to the President and his deputy to stop dancing on the graves of Kenyans. The President and his deputy must stop mistaking the wailings of mourning Kenyans for songs, the party said. This is the opposition party. And they're playing to the fact that security remains the Achilles heel for the Jubilee government. I like this photograph taken 9 months ago by Zane Freestyle, Sunrise Beach Training Session, Mombasa, which is of course my hometown. Very interesting piece by Stephen Price Brown, Kenya, obviously playing on the China-Kenya connection. Kenya shilling still at 3.5-year lows, 95.357. Nairobi all shares up 5.29% year to date. NSE 20 is down 0.782% year to date. The all share retreated yesterday 1.13%. Obviously the big headline event was Safaricom releasing its full year earnings, which I attended, and will get the video soon of the interview I did with Bob. They reported very strong full year earnings. Revenue up 12.9%, profit after tax up 38.5%, the dividend hike 36.2%, and that's a key message. Mobile data revenue was the outlier, accelerating 59.2%. M-Pesa up, revenue up 22.8%, now 20% of total revenue. Non-voice service revenue, which is data, broadband, SMS, M-Pesa, is now 42.1% of total revenue from 37.4% previously, so you can see how they're morphing from a voice business into something entirely different. A little bit of light profit taking yesterday, but I expect it to head higher. KCB was the most actively traded share at the Securities Exchange, shaved off 2.48% to close at 59, but that correction of just over 9% from an all-time high reached in the middle of last month now looks complete. If you ever want to track the stock market here in Nairobi in real time, just register on rich.co.ke, get a password, and then go to Rich Live during trading hours. And, you can keep up to date, bid offer, size of market, etc. Once again, thank you for stopping by.